So how do you know if you have an insulin or blood sugar issue? Well, number one, you crave sweets during the day. Are you irritable if meals are missed? Do you depend on coffee or caffeine in the morning? Eating relieves fatigue, or you develop fatigue after meals, one or the other. You must have sweets after a meal. After a meal, need a sweet. Eating sweets does not relieve cravings. See, if you can't get the food into your cells, then your body's going to say, oh, give me more sweets. Does that make sense to you? And we do special testing. We're going to look at fasting glucose. We're going to look at your HA1C, your glycosylated hemoglobin. We're going to look at your lactase dehydrogenase. We're going to look at insulin levels, your triglycerides, your lipids. Poor blood sugar function is going to cause poor brain function. How do you know you have poor brain function? Definitely. If you have insulin resistance, if your cells are resistant to insulin, you're going to have poor brain function over time. Declining memory, difficulty remembering names, decreased ability to stay focused, harder time to learn. This is why we see so many kids with learning disabilities and things like that, because a lot of these kids are hypoglycemic. They have too low a blood sugar. We've got temperament issues, depression, anxiety, fatigue when they drive. You forget like where you parked or something like that. How many people think they may have a blood sugar issue, an insulin issue, or a brain issue? I'll let you know if you're overweight, most likely you have one of those. Now let's talk about the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are a glandular tissue that sits right on top of your kidneys. They're essential because they release cortisol and they release hormones like epinephrine. They're important for your short-term stress response. So when you get stressed, something stresses you, your adrenal gland secretes cortisol and other hormones. That's going to slow down your immune system. This is why people get sick when they're stressed, because it slows down their immune system and other bodily functions. And what that will do is the cortisol will also increase blood sugar or glucose. It takes it out of the cells and brings it out into the bloodstream. When it gets out into the bloodstream, it's there so we can use it for energy. We get away from the stressor, and then when we run and get away from the stressor, bang, energy levels return, body returns to normal. Now, the problem is we have long-term stress. When you have long-term stress, what happens is the same thing. You're under stress, your body releases cortisol. When you release cortisol, it shuts down immune function, things like that, brings blood glucose, increases blood glucose. Then you have, when you increase blood glucose over time, now you're going to get insulin released. So stress and eating a high-grain, high-sugar diet is going to create big-time insulin. High insulin is going to create fat storage, insulin resistance. Then you get fatigue because you can't get the glucose into the cell. And then now you have low energy, and so you now start to eat more because of the fact that you can't get any energy into your cell, and then that just creates more of a stress, because anytime you eat more glucose in your bloodstream, that creates a stress on the body, and now you get burned out adrenal glands. So what we do is we have to test this. Now, how do you know you have adrenal problems? You're under stress. Now, a lot of people say, well, maybe I'm not under stress, but do you have work stress, relationship issues, finances, poor food choices, caffeine, blood sugar issues, lack of exercise, poor posture, injuries? These all stress the adrenal glands. Now, our biggest concern is fat storage. If you're overweight, you have too much fat storage, and it's because of increased glucose from high amounts of grains, increased insulin, increased cortisol. It all creates fat storage. All right? Now, how do you know if you have an adrenal problem? Number one, you have poor sleeping issues. You can't stay asleep. You may crave salty foods. You may be a very slow starter in the morning. You may get afternoon fatigue, difficulty in losing weight. Adrenal glands, difficulty in losing weight. Can't fall asleep. You perspire easily. You wake up tired after 6 or more hours of sleep. Now, in our office, we run something called an adrenal stress index, which is a salivary salivary test that we're going to test your cortisol levels in your saliva. It's a totally essential test that lets us know if you have burned out adrenals or if your adrenal glands are functioning too much, you've got too much cortisol, too little cortisol. It's going to let us know. It's going to let us know if you have the proper circadian rhythms, because you should have high cortisol in the morning, low cortisol at night. Some people have that flip. This is why they're slow starters in the morning, and at night they're kind of night owls. Can't get to sleep. Now, anybody think that they have a cortisol problem, right? Yeah, you probably do have a cortisol problem. If you're overweight or you're obese, you have an insulin-resistant problem. If you have an insulin-resistant problem, you probably have a cortisol problem, because they go hand in hand. Now, leptin, that's another hormone. It's the hot topic in weight loss today. Leptin is a hormone produced by fat cells. It stimulates an area in your brain called the hypothalamus. So it's produced by your fat cells. It goes up to your brain, stimulates the hypothalamus, and it tells you not to eat. It makes you feel full. All right? It also helps you burn fat for energy. So leptin's good, right? Now here's the thing. Obese people have high levels of leptin because they have high levels of fat. So the question is, why is it that they're still hungry all the time, and why is it that they don't burn fat? Well, because they develop what's called leptin resistance. Just like insulin resistance, you can become leptin resistant. And when you're leptin resistant, it's caused by long-standing large amounts of leptin. So anytime you have large amounts of insulin over long periods of time, your cells get sort of dull to the insulin. They become resistant. And if you have large levels of leptin, your cells become leptin resistant. So long-standing levels of leptin makes your brain cells resistant to leptin. So it stops signaling the satiety centers in the brain. So basically you feel hungry all the time and you're fat. You don't burn fat as good. So why do you develop leptin resistant? Well, increase in leptin levels. What increases leptin levels? Large amounts of fat cells. So the heavier you are, the more leptin you make, the more leptin resistant you become, and yada, yada, yada. Or inflammation. C-reactive protein, which we will test you for. C-reactive protein is an inflammation marker. C-reactive protein will bind to leptin and not allow leptin to cross over to your brain. High cortisol levels. We just talked about that. High cortisol, high insulin levels, boom. Insulin resistance and high carb, high sugar, high grain diet will cause you to become leptin and insulin resistant, thus overweight. Autoimmunity and inflammation. Autoimmunity is when your own cells, your own white blood cells that are supposed to kill foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses and cancer cells, they start to attack healthy tissue. It may start attacking your thyroid gland. 85% of thyroid problems, hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, are from what's called Hashimoto's, which means your immune system is actually attacking your thyroid. This can lead to your immune system attacking your joints, glands, muscles, nerves, heart, brain. Any tissue in the body can be affected by autoimmunity. Some examples of autoimmune diseases are rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's, lupus, scleroderma. Hashimoto's is the thyroid. A lot of overweight people are Hashimoto's. Graves' disease, MS, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, you name it. These are all autoimmune diseases. Autoimmunity will cause inflammation. Anything that creates inflammation will create stress and create an insulin and leptin resistance, and that eventually creates, as we know, obesity or being overweight. Your GI tract. Your GI tract is where you absorb your nutrition. Your GI tract needs to be healthy. Not only do we need to absorb food, we want to make sure that we're not absorbing undigested food. So what happens is we will develop what's called a leaky gut, and we'll talk about that right now. Let's go to leaky gut here. A leaky gut is when the separation from your gut, your intestine, what that does is it separates the inside of your intestine to the blood. Okay? It's like a screen door. And if the gut starts to break down, it becomes leaky. And when it becomes leaky, what will happen is full molecules will make it into the bloodstream. When they make it into the bloodstream, what that creates is an immune system that can now detect these large undigested proteins, and it develops autoimmunity or inflammation to these food sources. These food sources could be gluten, it could be casein, it could be protein in a grain, it could be soy, and these types of things if they're not broken down. If the gut becomes leaky, and here's an example of a microscope analysis of a leaky gut versus a healthy gut. We need to have tight junctions. So we call that enteropathy, or disease of the gut. Lots of people have leaky gut. Now, when you have leaky gut and inflammation in the gut, that will eventually create inflammation in your gut, your brain, and your body, which increases your stress response. When you have an increased stress response, you have an increased cortisol response. When you have an increased cortisol response, you secrete more glucose into your blood. When you secrete more glucose into your blood, then you have an insulin response. When you have an insulin response and insulin resistance, what will happen is you start to develop obesity. You start to store fat. So having a gut problem can cause you to be obese. A gut problem can cause you to be overweight. How do you know if you have a gut problem? Well, you have excessive belching, lots of burping, constipation, diarrhea, or irritable bowel syndrome. We see a tremendous amount of patients with irritable bowel syndrome in our office. Heartburn, indigestion, stomach pain, pass large amounts of gas, smelly gas. We've run special tests. We run a blood chemistry test, of course. We're going to do a stool microbial ecology. We're going to test your gut for any parasites. A lot of people have parasites they don't even know are living with them from some of the foods they've eaten. We test for dysbiosis, which is poor gut health, not the right amounts of bacteria. We can also run an intestinal permeability test is to find out, do you have the leaky gut? If you have the leaky gut, you're creating autoimmunity and inflammation in your body, which then creates obesity. And it can cause you to be more prone to being overweight. We can run a food intolerance test of gluten and casein. We can find out which foods you're sensitive to, which the big perpetrators are usually grains. We can take a look at your liver. Your liver is where a lot of your metabolism is controlled. And if the liver is not functioning well, if you have a toxic liver and you need liver detoxification, it's absolutely essential to you losing weight. Some of the biggest problems with people not able to lose weight is their liver is so sluggish. We're going to look at fatty acid metabolism. Okay, fatty acid metabolism is how good you burn and utilize fats. We can look at hormones. Now, your fat-burning hormones are growth hormone, insulin-like growth hormone factor, glucagon, adrenaline, thyroid hormones, and testosterone. Your fat-storing hormones are insulin, estrogen, and cortisol. So we can test your cortisol with an adrenal stress index. We can test your insulin with an adrenal stress index. We can test your estrogen with a female hormone panel. High estrogen surges is going to cause you to be more overweight. We can evaluate that again using blood and saliva. Blood for the general blood chemistry. Saliva would be for the female hormone panel and the cortisol tests. So this is your web. We have to run all these tests. Again, blood sugar, adrenal, gut dysfunction, hormone imbalances, immune imbalance, brain dysfunction, cellular dysfunction. That's what causes you to not have fat loss. You have to become unhealthy before you become overweight. And then the longer you're overweight, the more and more unhealthy you become. So we have to untangle your web. We have to run the most appropriate tests. We need to find out what's wrong with your physiology. Vital. We have to run the tests. Have you had all these tests done? Well, no. My doctor said that all of my tests are fine, that I don't need these tests done, and that's not the reason why I'm having trouble losing weight. I just need to exercise harder, and I need to starve myself. No, 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 no. That's not the thing. It's not about calorie restriction. It's about the right choices. So the biggest problem is most people have not had the right test done. Have you had all these special tests done? And we also look at traditional lab ranges. Here's the thing. You go to your doctor, and when you look at your blood work, you've got your levels here, and over here you've got the reference range. Now, where does that reference range come from? You know, like let's say we're going to look at glucose, for instance. The standard reference range for glucose is 65 to 110, okay, for blood glucose. The functional range is 85 to 100. So let me talk to you about the standard, the one you see when you're looking at your blood work. Where does that come from? Well, that comes from all of the people giving blood in this country. So if you go over to Quest and you sit down and you watch people come in. Now, who do you think comes in and gives blood the most? Well, it's the sickest people. The people that are sickest are the ones that give blood the most. So you are looking at the average of everybody giving blood. So I don't want to be the average of the sick people. The functional range is looking at people that have no symptoms, no disease, and what does their blood work look like. You want to be the average of that. So again, functional range is 85 to 100 for glucose, 65 to 110 is standard lab range. So you could be like 109, 110, which is complete insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, or very close to type 2 diabetes. You have to be 127 to type 2 diabetes. But you're you're pre-diabetic, and it's making you overweight. Or you could be 69 or 70, which means your blood sugar is so low, which you would think is good. It's not good. When your blood sugar goes low, that's even a bigger problem. Some people have a combination of fluctuating blood sugar. Sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low. And that's not good. So we want to look at a tighter range. The same thing with thyroid, the same thing for everything. Now, what is it that we do different? Well, number one, we're going to run all these tests. Now, a lot of people will go to these big weight loss centers. I'm not going to name names, but they'll go there and they don't look at their blood work. They don't look at their stool microbial ecology. They don't look at their food sensitivities. They just give you a bunch of food that's incredibly processed and do calorie restriction. And that's why you lose weight, but you gain it all back. And some of the stars that you see advertised doing these commercials for these particular companies, let me tell you, these stars are doing functional medicine. These stars out in California have somebody working with them. They understand all the things that we understand. They're not doing the same thing that you'd be doing if you went to that big chain. Okay? So we need to run these tests. We need to run a complete metabolic panel, a CBC, a lipid panel. These are standard. We want to look at thyroid antibodies and a complete thyroid panel, a vitamin D panel, an intestinal permeability test to see if you have leaky gut, immune panels, inflammation panels, the adrenal stress index, which is the salivary index, to look at your cortisol levels, hormone panels, estrogen, things like that, food sensitivity testing, which is a blood test for gluten, soy, yeast, dairy, and eggs to see if you have inflammation from some of the foods that you're eating. See if you have autoimmunity, to see if you have stool microbial ecology, to see if you have any dysbiosis, parasites, gut infections, and inflammation panels, which is homocysteine, C-reactive protein. Remember, C-reactive protein inhibits leptin, which is going to help you feel full, things like that, help you burn fat. So what do we do different? We're going to do a functional neurological workup. We're going to look at blood sugar regulation, insulin resistance. We're going to look at all these things. How many people have actually had these tests? Has your doctor looked at these tests? Do you know if you're healthy or not from the inside? The other thing we're going to do in our office, we do this with a lot of our chronic pain patients, is we put our patients on exercise with oxygen therapy. So we use oxygen concentrators and we have you exercise. Now we'll do this probably for the first month of patients with exercise. We want to do it with oxygen just because it's going to help them improve their brain function. It's also going to help them use fat as energy. So we'll do that. So we'll actually wear a cannula. They'll be breathing in oxygen. They'll be doing exercise with oxygen therapy. We'll use an oxygen concentrator, which makes oxygen from 20% to 90% oxygen. What are the main benefits of using oxygen? I know you probably can't read this, but studies have shown that it stimulates your brain activity, it increases your memory capacity, it boosts your concentration, develops stronger alertness, raises your energy levels, improves strength, builds endurance, increases utilization of fat for energy. That's a big one. It detoxifies your blood, it reduces your stress, it calms anxiety, alleviates tension, headaches, remedy for irregular sleeping patterns. I put all my insomnia patients on exercise with oxygen therapy. I put a lot of my patients with chronic pain on it. And in the beginning part of our program, patients will do exercise with oxygen therapy. So it's all about the healing process. It's about getting your body healthy. Again, you got to be healthy before you can lose weight. The price of greatness is responsibility. Again, it's your responsibility. You can only control what you have in front of you. If you took a piece of paper, drew a line down the center of it, put your age right in the middle, let's say you're 35, 40, you can't do anything about the past 40 years. You can only make a change going forward, and it's your responsibility. It's nobody else's responsibility but yourself. So are you ready to make a change? Are you ready to lose weight and keep it off? Well, let me tell you what we can do. Since you're watching this video online, you can come into our office and we can do a weight loss, science-based weight loss consultation. Normally that costs $250 to do, but since you are coming into, $275 to do. Normally if you just called us, out of the phone book. But since you're watching this online right now, if you page down on here, you can look a little further. There's an area where you can opt in, and if you opt in, we will send you information on how you can come in for a weight loss, science-based weight loss consultation, which is going to include us going over your blood work. It's going to include us doing a full functional neurological exam, sitting down, understanding what your hopes are, what your concerns are, why we think you may possibly be overweight, why you may be obese. We're going to talk to you about all these things. Look at your blood work, look at the special tests, and then you come back and we will go over all those findings. Now normally that costs $275 to do, but since you're online right now, if you opt in, just below, it'll cost you just $77. So go ahead and opt in and give our office a call, and we will do an exam on you and see if we can help you with your weight issues. Thanks a lot for listening to this DVD. Take care.